about building economies for the future, business and human rights. So when I think of a genocide, whether we're talking about Rwanda, what is currently unfolding in Sudan, what's unfolding in Gaza, in Palestine, I see combatants. I see desperate citizens fleeing, bombs going off. I don't for 1 minute think about the corporate sector. I don't for 1 minute think that there are normal people like you and I who are behind the businesses that support conflict or genocide. I also don't see myself in that conversation. Reading your report, I had multiple traumatic moments thinking about myself as a consumer, where I've taken my money, what choices I've made. And we'll talk a little bit more about this because some of the companies or multinationals that I mentioned there are going to shock you. And they will force, I hope, a conversation with yourself, a reckoning about the decisions that you make. So I'm trying to not confront you or be combative. I'm trying to create an invitation for all of us to engage with this report and center ourselves as well as citizens of the world, as decision makers, and as consumers. So with that in mind, why this report? Why did you put it together? What motivated you?
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank all of you for being here, and especially the Nelson Mandela Foundation for inviting me to South Africa, and for gifting me with the opportunity to have so many meaningful conversations. I'd also would like to say and to acknowledge the challenges that everyone in the foundation, including the trustees, are experiencing because of my very presence here. What you're going to listen to is the reason why I got sanctioned by the United States, which is an abomination because I'm protected under the Privilege and Immunities Convention, under the UN Charter. I'm a lawyer who serves pro bono the United Nations, and at least I would expect I do my work based on the trust that the UN would at least protect me. And in fact, one of the most influential and powerful of its members treats me as, how do they call me? A threat to global economy. So this is what this report that is captured in the scene behind me did. And now, because I've not been silent, now they're going to go after anyone who interacts with me, and I really beg you to keep your eyes on the Nelson Mandela Foundation when I've left the country, because they're vicious. This is the reality. And coming from a region which has been devastated by the mafia, I do understand how these people operate, because the mafia is not what Hollywood retells. It's not about drug dealers and street thugs. No, it's about a very sophisticated white-collar system where there is a collusion between the political system or ecosystem and the financial system, and they collude in order to protect each other. And whomever tries to denounce them get either ridiculed, ignored, smeared, or worse. And at the same time, as someone who's been dealing with Palestine for quite a long time, I realized that our understanding of Palestine is progressive. I mean, the Palestinians have denounced apartheid for a long time, and still it took decades for all of us to understand why South Africa had given the world the term of apartheid, but it fits very well, not only Palestine, but the other systems where there is one racial group imposing a domination over one other or other racial groups in order to preserve that domination, and uses inhumane acts as a tool to enforce it. Little by little, and this is how I decided to contribute as a special rapporteur to the understanding of Palestine beyond the cycle of the reporting of violence. And since the beginning, I've tried to draw the attention of the UN member states, but also a broader public, and this is the other part, this is something that I'm not forgiven for, the fact of bringing an alternative narrative about Palestine outside the United Nations, where even the stones know what the Palestinians have endured for over 7 decades. So I was saying, maybe if the large public understands what it is about, it's not a conflict, it's not a neighborhood dispute, it's an oppression, it's an unlawful occupation which employs apartheid to pursue ethnic cleansing of the little that remains of Palestine. So I've worked on a number of reports capturing broader aspects of it. I wrote 2 reports on genocide, and one was really an X-ray of acts of genocide that had been committed in the first 5 months after October 7, was brutal, and I said, oh, this is the worst report I've ever written. And then came another genocide report, genocide as colonial erasure, and then I said, oh my God, this is the worst report I've ever written, because it situates those acts of genocide within the settler colonial context. This is why the ICJ case that South Africa, sorry, I took it a bit long, but it's important. This is the ICJ case that South Africa has initiated is so critical, because this is the first settler colonial genocide that will ever be adjudicated before an international court. And so it resonates so strongly with the Aboriginal communities in Australia who have survived a genocide with great difficulties, but also the Native Americans in the US. The US is a country born out of over 500 genocides, 500 Native American communities were genocided, and Canada committed genocide until the 90s. So this is, and the wounds are still open. And while I was doing that, I realized, and that this is also because I have an economist as an husband, so it helped. I mean, the Israeli economy kept on being very, very schizophrenic. So there was a part of part of the Israeli economy which was really suffering, and it gave the sense of how much Israeli families were affected, especially in the north, in the south. But then the Israeli stock exchange kept on going up. How was it possible? And the other aspect is that Palestinians have often pointed to, and look at the BDS movement, for example. I've always pointed to the fact that there were private entities, businesses connected to the exploitation of Palestinian resources. So I said, okay, let me look at it in the context of a genocide. I had in mind arms manufacturers, and
logistics.
Primarily arms manufacturers. Then I sent a call for submission, and I received over 200 reports. And it was probably the large lawyers, human rights organizations, investigative journalists, private individuals who had paid experts in order to collect information. So I set up a database of 1,000 entities. And it was not possible to pinpoint, even define business, it was not possible. So I adopted the definition of private sector, private entities, that includes arms manufacturers, heavy machinery, surveillance service producers, or goods, the tech industry, goods and services producers, the tourism industry, and then universities, pension funds, banks, investment funds, charities. So when we had, I had a great research team supporting, so when we had laid out all this, we tried to make sense of it, and this is how I could tell the story, because it's about storytelling and explaining the system. This is what brought me to be considered a threat to the global economy. The clarity of this is not just about Palestine, this is us, this is Africa, this is Congo, this is probably Sudan. I'm not an expert on Africa, but I can tell you this is resonating a lot with people in the part of the world I come from, who connect the precarity of their economic situation, especially the young generation compared to my generation, and say, you know what, it's not just an act of charity to engage in Palestine, it's also about us. And I will explain. So I say that the private sector, can I stand up? Yeah. So the private sector contains...
That's the lecture, guys.
the private sector, I will be shorter on the next answers, I promise. But the private sector the economy of the occupation, what Israel has set up, just in the little that remains of Palestine that has been occupied in 1967, but I'm not saying that this has not been practiced also on the Palestinians inside Israel. But in the occupied Palestinian territory, Israel has, during the occupation, developed two pillars, displacement and replacement. And it would have not been able to do so without the private sector, because it has used the weapons industry, tech surveillance, and heavy machinery to displace the Palestinians. You need to use force in order to, in order to kick out, to segregate an entire community. You need surveillance to make sure that they don't leave those Bantustans, right? And you need to make sure that they don't get into your space. So you need to also to develop, to adapt, to customize those weapons. And Israel has tested for decades method of surveillance and even shoot-to-kill policies on the Palestinians. And of course, the heavy machineries, Volvo, Hyundai, Caterpillar, have been used to cleanse the area, to destroy villages, to uproot trees, and so on and so forth. And while this was done, replacement came in. So Palestinians had to be replaced. And for the construction of the colonies, heavy machinery was needed, but also there were businesses needed, and they come from abroad, primarily from Europe, to build the colonies, to build the electricity grid, the infrastructure that was needed to connect the colonies, the railways, the tramways. So you needed all these sectors. And then once the colonies are in parallel with development of the colonies, of course, the agricultural business developed. I had, open a parenthesis, I had a discussion with the Norwegian pension fund, which, Norway is a great country, friend of Palestine, right? Well, 10% of its sovereign fund was invested in 45 companies that I have investigated. If my report, which cites 48 entities, were to be read as a list, I would have failed. It's a system. It talks about a system. And so the examples I give are just to explain the system. So this is even tourism, Airbnb and Booking.com.
That's the one that traumatized me. I thought, hold on, what? Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because
you felt happy with Amazon and Google.
Arms companies are so far from my everyday reality.
Yeah.
So as I sit here, it's December around the corner. I want to go somewhere. So you're saying I can't go on my phone and go Airbnb, Bookings.com without thinking about this? How do I link those?
You use internet and you book your hotels and your trips without Airbnb and Booking.com.
Yeah. What are they doing?
Yes.
What are they doing? That's what I want to understand.
Our parents used to go on holiday, right, without Airbnb. No, but this is the thing. Even the Norwegian pension funds used to say, yeah, but they just produce vegetables.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. They produce vegetables that should be produced by the Palestinians, not by the settlers. And the tourism industry is, look at Airbnb and Booking.com. They advertise, and all this has been, I gathered information, so they get, because then they delete it. But they advertised nice, splendid apartment in a French-speaking neighborhood, in a settlement, on stolen land. Property that has been stolen from the Palestinians. And there are even Keller and real estate agents like Keller selling Palestinian property before even it's stolen. Auctioning Palestinian property from Montreal and New York. It's abominable what the system behind it is. So replacing the Palestinians, and this is not the end of it, because this system, which you see, it's a sort of it's an engine system, wouldn't work without the enablers, the universities, the researchers, research institutes, banks, pension funds, which have been producing the tools to maintain the Israeli economy. Now in Ireland, they have cut the selling, the purchase of Israeli bonds, but Vanguard and others have been providing credits to Israel in order to allow it not to nosedive as its expenditure was shifting toward it. So it's a complicated system, but not that complicated after all. And there is one thing that applies, to answer your question, it applies also to other countries, because the private sector has been the driver and the enabler of settler colonialism. Behind every conflict, there is a struggle for resources. And behind any settler colonial enterprise, there is this rapaciousness to get resources. And it has happened inside Europe before it became too expensive and pushed settler colonialism to become what it has become, an exported domination strategy. But so, of course, look at Congo. The question is, settler colonialism ultimately kills the right of self-determination of a people. And as it's true in the context of Palestine, it's true in the context of Congo. And the International Court of Justice has said the occupation is unlawful. So businesses, the very fact that businesses or any private entity is connected to an illegal endeavor puts it at risk. They have entered a red zone. They are already violating the guiding principles on business and human rights. And this is why they must be held accountable.
I just want to break down a few concepts, because listening to you now, it sounds as if the involvement of different players in this ecosystem is at multiple levels. There are those who are actively arming the genocide, producing the arms that are being used against Palestinians. There are those who are profiting from it. And then there are those who are participating in the economy knowingly or unknowingly. What I'm getting at here is that help us understand how your report makes categories of complicity, involvement, activity, so that we may locate the conversation on new economic pathways. What do we do with what you're telling us? When we leave today, how do we engage with your report? And what does it mean to disengage from this very overwhelming ecosystem?
Look, it's the engaging unknowingly that I would question, because we are not in the 1800s.
Okay.
We are in a time, we live in an era where businesses, private entities commit to ethical guidelines, and their ethical guidelines speak of specific principles. There is a global compact, there are the UN guiding principles on businesses and human rights, and it's interesting because then companies say, yeah, but they are not hardcore law. Of course, they commit, they advertise on their website. If you look at the Italian oil company, I mean, if you look at the website, it looks like a human rights organization. It seems that their purpose is to protect the environment. And you know, this is, I mean, I don't know how it's in English, but it's pubblicità ingannevole, I don't know how to translate, but it's a misleading advertisement, form of advertisement. And so it's punishable under in the Italian system. So there are other forms of forms of responsibilities associated with it. But the thing is that the International Court of Justice has said that the occupation is unlawful, totally, and that must be dismantled totally and unconditionally. And it has translated into a form of apartheid and racial discrimination imposed on the Palestinians. What else is missing? All the more, everyone is, as of January 2024, thanks to South Africa, the International Court of Justice has recognized the risk of genocide. That was this is what has triggered the obligation to prevent. At that point, there is no confusion. You need to disengage. But even before, frankly, there is no other human rights situation. No other situation where human rights violations have been systematically documented as well as it has happened in the occupied Palestinian territory. So the fact that these businesses, as some have replied to me, oh, we didn't know. Okay, now that you know, will you disengage? No. Okay, so you have to be held accountable. And there are two ways to hold these businesses accountable, and they're not mutually exclusive. And there is I think for certain businesses is the people's tribunal. You choose, as a consumer, you choose not to invest in these businesses. And for example, Volvo. Volvo in my country is the image of the safe car, of the family car that protects you. Well, no, because the logo of the Volvo is associated for the Palestinians to the destruction, to the pulverization of their homes, because Volvo machineries have been used, like Hyundai machineries have been used to complete the destruction of Gaza that was not that was started with the bombing. So they have pulverized entire areas. So this is Volvo and this is Hyundai. So these businesses should first of all meet the consumers' ethical choices, but also they should be brought to court. They should face justice.
Are you saying that the companies themselves,
of course,
there must be a legal process against the executives, against the...
Absolutely. And it depends. This is why it very much depends on the legal, there are jurisdictional limitations. So let's say the International Criminal Court is responsible for individuals who have committed war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. So those who have provided the systems, the technology that has allowed Israel to become the killing machinery, to the Israeli army to become the killing machinery that it has been operating in Gaza, well, they should be investigated at least. And we have the CEO of Palantir on record when he was challenged in a public debate by someone who said, yes, but you have been killing my family, presumably terrorists, he said. So he showed, this is in my report, so he showed knowledge of what he was doing. And this is why you see the hubris of these people. I can tell you in other cases, it's really, they behave as if they were above the law. And this is what businesses have done all along. And states, with the legislations or the loopholes in the legislations, have created the perfect ecosystem for businesses to continue to elude their obligations. And this cannot happen. And there have been two moments in history that have been transformative. One was the Holocaust, after which this was the first time where we had the post-Holocaust industrialist trials, where, for example, those who had provided critical chemicals, materials to the Nazi regime were brought to court. Then we can discuss whether justice was delivered or not. But in South Africa, there was another momentum because of, after the apartheid, there was this questioning of the role of businesses in creating this abuse and sustaining this abusive regime. And Palestine is offering the opportunity to become better. But this is where courts have to function. So one is the ICC, but also where these businesses are registered, it's important, or where the CEOs, in cases, again, there is not one-size-fits-all analysis, but the 48 entities that I've put on notice, for each of them to each of them I've provided a factual analysis of what they have done, and then a legal analysis, a legal assessment. Look, prima facie you have been contributing to the violation of Palestinian self-determination and to facilitate annexation and permanent occupation. So just because of that, you are contributing to a human rights impact. So somewhat you need to be held accountable. It depends on the legislation on the country. But if, for example, Heidelberg Cement, a German company who has been extracting, he got concessions to extract. Extractionism is a super relevant story in this continent. Yeah. But they've been exhausting quarries in the occupied Palestinian territory. So they were renewing. In the time of genocide, they were renewing the licenses. Well, this is pillage, my friends. This is a war crime. So why the CEO of this company should not be investigated? Because this is the test. Again, we have not been able to stop the genocide, we have not been able to prevent the genocide, but we need to make sure that there is accountability. And this is why lawyers now are more needed than ever. Let's give meaning to this wonderful profession.
So I'm just thinking about the extractive industry. Economies built on the back of poor laborers here in Africa, in South Africa, environmental rights being subverted. We have cases of, is it silicosis, miners dying, no recourse, no compensation. Glencore comes to mind, Total in Zambia, Exxaro as well. I'm now thinking, if you raise the complicity, the direct responsibility of huge multinationals and encourage consumers to boycott them, not to invest in them, I bet you there are people in this room who are thinking, what about the jobs? What about the jobs? And I'm wondering whether is that now blackmail? Will economies collapse if action is taken as a result of this? Or are you saying the cost to humanity is so much bigger than what economies, countries stand to lose if they took action? It's about business ethics, right? And the broader picture.
Absolutely. Look, I think that this is a dilemma who shouldn't be resolved by individuals, individuals themselves. To give you an example, I was recently, I don't know if you have noticed, but in Italy there was an upsurge. There was really a popular uprising, and it's still ongoing, but of course there is repression like there has been in Germany, in France, in the UK. So for once, Europeans are doing the right thing. They are reacting against the businesses, against the governments, taking legal actions, etc., which is amazing. And but the thing is that, for example, dockers have been particularly dockers and trade unions have been really effective in Italy because they've said we are going to block all. And you know, I heard in late 2023 Dr. Naledi Pandor saying, if for 1 month trade unions called for strikes, the genocide would stop immediately. This thing stuck to my mind, and then I've been repeating it obsessively and discussing with trade unions everywhere, including in Italy. And then there was a moment where the dockers did it. They said, we call a strike, we start blocking everything. Students had already done it, and that they had been punished, but all of a sudden they came out together. And here's the dilemma. One set of dockers in a city said, yes, but if we close the port, and the other port is going to open, there will be a crisis because the economic gains are going to shift and we will be punished. This is why I'm saying you need to, how many ports in Italy are transferring weapons to Israel? 5? Well, the 5 of them have to come together. And again, there is a legal action to take against the government because sending weapons to Israel is ipso facto a violation of international law. It's very, very clear, it's easy. And so why I'm quoting this anecdote, because I think that we need to see each other as a humanity, and we need to understand that we live in an economic system that has made the majority of us disposable. We do not count, and weakening our rights is a way to make us more and more disposable. And Europe is seeing it. I mean, I see the difference between my generation and the next generation. There is much more precarity in terms of access to job security, access to health, etc. Support to education. Education was free when I was at university, and now it's changing. So, but while the expenses are, the public expenditure is shifting toward military from health and education. So the question is, we live in a system which is devised to make us weak, and this is capitalism. It's not a state of nature. It's been there for 300 years. But it's not just, I'm not proposing an anti-capitalist agenda, but I'm just saying we need to tame this wild beast. It's okay to pursue profits, but not to the expense of human life. And this is true in Palestine, it's true in Congo, it's true in South Africa, etc., etc. So to answer your question is, yes, there must be alternative to this, because first of all, the thing is that the pressure is not to aim to apart from several problematic companies who are extremely detrimental to the environment, like oil companies or coal. I mean, it's an issue. It is about the environment, and it has a cost. It has a cost which maybe it's deferred, but it's still a cost on humanity and other creatures. But the thing is that someone needs to pay for that cost. It shouldn't be the workers. So the first pressure should be for the business not to shut down, just to change, not to trade with Israel. It's not that complicated. Trade with someone else. Why fruits is to be exported? I mean, this country export coal, export fruit juices and raw diamonds to Israel. Find other markets, but also diamonds. And I mean, there are things. I'm not an expert in South African economies, but you have excellent talents. Work out other solutions. This is not impossible. Actually, it is necessary, and it has been in other contexts. We need to build alternatives to this system because, in any case, in the long run, it's not sustainable. And again, it's proving possible to disengage from the Israeli economy without collapsing. BDS has been quite successful this year, more than in the past. And no insurance company has gone bankrupt or others. But again, Israel is one, and it's going to set an example to start behaving ethically. As consumers, we need to do ethical choices, ethical purchase, as administrations and institutions, ethical procurements, and ethical sales as a state. So this is not an easy answer, but we have to try an alternative.
And just to be clear, I wasn't picking on Glencore. It's a real situation, right? Their respective subsidiaries own the mines, and 3 ports involved in delivery of 15 coal shipments to Israel. Israel does get some of it to Colombia, from Colombia, and so on. But I also saw somewhere where there is conversation about civilian infrastructure, and I'll bring it back to the South African reality, the mining houses. For all the ills that I mentioned, I bet you every mining company would mention a hospital that they built, a school for civilians, a road that they built. I can even go to Sudan and talk about the UAE. The UAE is not just focusing in responding to this crisis on the military elements of it. They will talk about how they are investing in Africa, and we are seeing as they crisscross the length and breadth of the globe, how UAE officials are speaking a little bit more on multilateral platforms about the money that they're bringing into Africa. So you have this duality. You have this reality, and you have a claim that they make about investing in civilian infrastructure. Your response? It's
Look,
for the people.
Everything has a price. And again, the question is, I mean, I hear, and it's no surprise, but I hear especially young people being very, very critical in this country when discussing the end of apartheid, because they say, yeah, but look at the economic situation. This is the thing. You cannot dismantle apartheid for real without uprooting, without dismantling the economic, financial underpinning, the backbone of the system. And again, settler colonialism is in and of its own an exploitative system that is to be seen and undone in order to then create an alternative. Dismantling the discrimination was critical, was fundamental, but if there has not been a proper redistribution, and again, I don't want to speculate because I don't know South Africa well or well enough, but the land reform that was expected, has it taken place? Yes or no? Has justice been made? Has there been compensation, restitution, so as to rebuild the trust, to give the economic means? Which means it's not a failure. It's not a failure. It's still work in progress, and it is to be continued. So justice is always an unfinished business. Good news.
There's a lot to say about that intersection, the struggle for ethical and just business practices. I'll just pause here for 1 minute and just talk about you. You've been sanctioned by the United States, and who knows, maybe there'll be more sanctions after this.
Oh, no.
How has that, I don't know, how has that energized or truncated your work? I ask this because we are at the Nelson Mandela Foundation. The man about whom we gather at this time annually for the lecture, and on 18th of July when it's Nelson Mandela Day, the man was portrayed by some as this cuddly grandpa who didn't have radical politics. He did. He responded to the demands of the time. When it was time for the armed struggle, that's what he called for. When it was time for engagement across color lines, across geography, across gender, he knew how to do that. When it was time to lift that Rugby World Cup trophy, he knew how to do this. He was also about dialogue. And I think dialogue is far more important when we disagree. When we agree, it's easy to have dialogue, but when we disagree, it's far more difficult. So I want to ask you that. You've been sanctioned. You still have to do the work. You still want consumers and states and organizations, academic institutions, to take the work seriously and urgently. What does it mean to do this work in the context of those sanctions, and what has been the cost to you personally?
The cost has been heavy, but I don't want to talk about me. I want to talk about the fact that anyone who does it, and especially the Palestinians, face it. What happens to me is a reflex of how much hatred there is, and how many resources are invested to silence any debate concerning Palestine. You know, wherever I go, I try to engage, to create those occasions of dialogue. I come from a country where there is a very conservative Jewish Italian populations. And the phenomenon of progressive, critical Jews, anti-Zionist Jews is very new. It's post-October 2023. They are primarily young people who are facing extreme pressure, isolation, retaliation. It's pretty horrible, but they're wonderful human beings, and there is this sense of companionship. We are in this together. And it's about who we are as human beings, regardless of religion. And also, I wonder, how can one invoke religion to justify the killing of kids? 20,000 kids, 20,000 children, kids, just by bombs. We don't know how many are still under the rubble. And the fact that our Palestinians, there is a level of dehumanization of the Palestinians in the part of the world I come from, which is disgusting. And I feel appalled. The reason why I'm so devoted to this is because I'm European. I take not offense, but I take an issue when people tell me, oh, you are so Palestinian. No, I'm not Palestinian. I'm Italian. I'm a very proud Italian who was raised in a family who educated her. My first teaching and my first readings were about the Holocaust. And this is part of my upbringing. It cannot be taken away from me. So I take issue when someone in the Jewish community in Italy tries to shut me down and not to let me talk. What am I saying that it's so offensive? So first of all, why do I have to carry this? It's such an attack. It's so offensive to be told that you are an anti-Semite. And it's so vilifying toward what Holocaust has been, what anti-Semitism is still in the part of the world I come from and beyond. Anti-Semitism is still real, but it's discrimination against the Jews because they are Jews. It has nothing to do with this Israel and its proclaimed religion. I couldn't care less. Israel could proclaim itself to be Buddhist, to be Muslim, to be Christian or secular. It wouldn't change a thing, because what matters is compliance with international law. So all the allegations against me and those like me are just a mere distraction, not to talk about the issues, because attacking me as an anti-Semite is just a reason not to talk about Palestine. And I say, come. I also told asked the Nelson Mandela Foundation, can you please invite the Zionist parts of the population, which is not just South African Jews, are Christian Zionists. I mean, this is the thing we need to talk about, because even in my country, the most conservative policies are enacted by people who have nothing to do with Judaism. We are not, who are anti-Semites for real until 50 years ago. I've been accused to be an anti-Semite by a parliamentarian, and there is a picture of him with a swastika on his left hand. But the problem is me, advocating for human rights. No, this is serious. And this is why, again, it's not about me. It's really not about me. But again, because I'm a European descendant of people who let millions of Jews, including 1,000 Italian Jews, to be slaughtered, and before being slaughtered, to be starved in ghettos, I feel a moral imperative inside me to stand against this. Okay. And this is the only reason I'm against this. And brings me to this.
Last question. There's some impatience.
Sorry.
I mean, the ICJ ruled yesterday that UNRWA has not been, there's no evidence brought by Israel that UNRWA has been infiltrated by Hamas. It recognized UNRWA as the body that is authorized to do the work that it is supposed to do. So there are these periodic legal and moral victories that should, to use that word again, energize those who do the kind of work that you do. But in the context of what you found in your report, this is my final question before we get to the audience, is international law enough? Is it enough to make accountable the corporate entities that you have just highlighted? And where does that process start? Very quickly.
I think it is. International law, though, is as effective as the will of states to enforce it. And this is where people living in democracies make a difference compared to people living in dictatorships, because we can influence the governments to protest demonstrations, but also direct action. This is why the BDS is so important, and you do not need to adhere to the movement, but it's something that should be so intuitive to South Africans, and it's less intuitive for others. But it's necessary to take concrete actions. International law is as good as it's needed in order to bring justice. And justice for Palestine is not just justice for Palestine, it's justice also for us, and starts at home.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to this exclusive interview we have with you on Hilaal TV. She's of course touring South Africa for her Nelson Mandela annual lecture. She's the UN Special Rapporteur on the occupied territories of Palestine. It's none other than Dr. Francesa Albanese. Dr. Albanese, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Dr. Albanese, your report earlier on the complicity many corporations have played during these 2 years of the genocide. How important was it to paint that, or to have that report to show the world the complicity not just done by states, but also from various multinationals?
It is important because eventually it shows that there is the genocide is not only a crime, is a crime that has been profitable for many, and this is unacceptable. We cannot tolerate, we cannot accept, and we cannot be clockworked into acceptance that this is a normal state of being. There should be pushback. And it's important that those who have partaken in the crimes that Israel has committed, from extrajudicial executions and forced displacement, home demolitions, forced evictions, to acts of torture and genocide, they need to be held accountable, including businesses, of course. But this is a genocide that would have not been possible without the private sector, including banks and universities and charities. It's really a rich landscape being involved, without the complicity of member states, who have first and foremost, through their actions and omissions, created the environment that has let Israel's impunity fester.
We speak of international law, and during your report on how corporations have played a role in the complicity or the genocide in Gaza, when we speak of the necessity of holding them accountable and the impunity that Israel has enjoyed, are we still in a belief that international law can hold not just states, but also these corporations accountable for the deaths of close to 70,000 Palestinians, even more if we are to believe the Gaza Health Report?
Look, I think that part of making the system better is about understanding what international law is and is not. International law is not a magic tool. International law is not a magic wand. It doesn't happen without enforcement. So member states, of course, state institutions are the first responsible to ensure respect and adherence, respect of and adherence to international law. And they also need to ensure respect of international law of their private businesses. So, for example, the International Court of Justice Advisory Opinion of 2024 that has been largely ignored by member states says that reminds states of their obligation to make sure that their private sector, their businesses do not get involved into crimes in the occupied Palestinian territory. So again, eventually the responsibility is with states, but citizens are the ultimate guardians of respect for international law. And when institutions fail, they have to step up and remind state authorities of their responsibilities.
Dr. Albanese, the Prime Minister of your country of birth, Giorgia Meloni, had an ICC complaint filed against her. Of course, we don't know what's going to happen in terms of the progression in terms of that. But I spoke to somebody who was on the flotilla from Italy, Redi Thlabi, and she told me that the overwhelming support of Italian citizens for the solidarity of Gaza and for the protection of human rights supersedes that of the government. What we're seeing in the West now in terms of civil society support, citizen support, we've never maybe seen that in the West in a very long time. That speaks volumes, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, it does. It does. This is why this is one of the silver lining of this very dark phase, that there are signs of change, including in the awareness that people have to make sacrifices and that need to do something to stop this system of complicity, wherever the complicity comes from, being in the private sector or state institutions. So yes, citizens' mobilization is absolutely needed, necessary, and vital to sustain the struggle against genocide, permanent occupation, and apartheid.
One final question, Dr. Albanese. The construction of Gaza, I still believe that there's a genocide that is happening there. We don't know the length of the ceasefire, how long it will hold, but there are certain individuals that have been brought in terms of concern, one of them being former British Prime Minister Tony Blair, Jared Kushner. It seems there's going to be a sort of neo-colonial take on how Gaza is going to be reconstructed. Various entities, various corporations are going to be involved. How important is it for the United Nations? And I'm sure you will be keeping a close eye on what happens there. But how do we, as the world, make sure that the citizens of Gaza are not being used as a tool of capitalism and neocolonialism?
They have been used already, because the Palestinians have unwillingly provided an endless testing ground for Israel of weapons, surveillance technologies that have made Israeli surveillance products so profitable and bought in so many countries, including in the global majority. And this it's something that should alarm all of us, because eventually these tools are repressive tools that can be used against us, ordinary citizens. So, but again, I'm really skeptical about a reconstruction that is projected as a business endeavor on the mass graves of tens of thousands of Palestinians. This is unacceptable. So this is why the deception here is, I would have expected a much more vocal and robust, principled response from other states that are not those who are part of this colonial endeavor, Arab states and states from both the global minority and the global majority. Where do we draw the line? So first, the genocide is to end, and it's not over. And look at the ceasefire. I mean, what ceasefire are we talking about? 100 Palestinians have been killed since the ceasefire was proclaimed. This is unacceptable. And this that have to be accounted for. But also, first the genocide is to happen, and then the occupation must go. The occupation is unlawful. It is to be dismantled totally and unconditionally. And this is not because the Special Rapporteur says that, but because this is the decision of the International Court of Justice, reaffirmed by the General Assembly last year, which gave Israel 1 year to withdraw the troops, to dismantle the colonies, to stop exploiting Palestinian resources. And this is what member states, including South Africa, including Italy, this is what member states should have put at the center of the table. This is what the United Nations should put as a condition to discuss the future. But the present day is to be end of the genocide, end of the occupation, and accountability for the crimes that both illegal endeavors have caused.
Dr. Albanese, absolute pleasure to have this interview with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's Dr. Francesa Albanese, the UN Special Rapporteur on the occupied territories in Palestine. That's all we have for you here on Hilaal TV.